Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast. And joining me today again, Bryce. How you doing, Bryce?
Pretty good, Terry. How you been?
I'm doing presentable. Have you ever done that thing where, like, for whatever reason, you didn't get a lot of good sleep over the weekend, and then you got one good day of sleep, and you're like, I am reforged, and then at like 7 p.m. that day, you're like, I envy the dead.
No, it's never lasted until 7 p.m. for me.
Yes. That goes in the category of people who are like, oh, sphere magic would be awesome. This is what I would do with Forces 3. I'm like, do you know what I would do with basically any sphere at level 1? It would be amazing. Except for probably Spirit 1. I feel like that would raise a lot of questions. But
What would I do with Spirit 1? I would be freaked out all the time.
you can finally make out what all your cats are staring at.
Speaking of Lovecraft, there was a Lovecraft story about that.
I have never read, what is it, The Cats of Uthar or whatever it is?
The Cats of Ulthar. No, but I was referring to a different Lovecraft story from Beyond. So the guy makes a thing that lets him see and make visible all the things that he can't see, that people just don't see. That freaks him out, and eventually they come through and presumably eat him. It's never really made clear exactly what happened to him because it's a Lovecraft story. So the point of view character runs away or faints or whatever. So.
Yes. So today, instead of talking about locations, we are talking about some of the creatures and entities that are brought off in the mythos. These are slightly more made scale. They're also where a lot of the other authors tended to have a lot of fun. They're not quite as incomprehensible. They're just kind of weird. It's something that a group could possibly take on, or at least influence, or at least run away from. Because, Azathoth or Yog-Sothoth, the nexus of reality, kind of by definition, you can't run away from that. But, you can bolt from a Migo or a Starspawn or a Shuggoth, I feel.
Yeah, but they could always just call in one of Nyarlathotep's 1,000 mask forms. So, I mean, if you really make them mad.
If that happens, that's one of those things where it's like, I got him to call his dad because he couldn't deal with it. Kind of like someone who noted,
mad.
Yeah, because what is it? As an adult, the closest we get to being able to say, I'm going to tell my mom is you'll be hearing from my lawyer.
It has way less weight and yet way more.
Yes.
When you think about it. Yeah.
So who first are we going to talk about?
I think we're going to start with some great old ones, which are defined rather loosely as a group of creatures that once ruled the earth and were later imprisoned on it. Now, this isn't really a Lovecraft definition. He didn't have concrete definitions of group names. He just used them interchangeably, basically depending on what he thought sounded cool at the time. These were really applied and codified by later authors.
Yep. First one, as I think is in everyone's mind right now, is Bakrug, the lake-dwelling god, the semi-amphibian Thumha, the voiceless ones of Im in the land of Minar. And there is that is one of those ridiculously Lovecraftian descriptor sentences where it's just like, was Terry having a small stroke? No one will ever know. And there was a point where I was reading a book called, I think Your Religion is Wrong or something like that, where an author does a bad job of making fun of religions. And in one point, he didn't read anything about either the Amish or the Mormons. So he started acting like they worship the great old ones. And it was just kind of full of sentences like that. Either that or I tragically misremembered it. This deity sleeps beneath the calm waters of a lake that bordered Ib and the city of Sarnath. When the humans of Sarnath cruelly slaughtered the populace of Ib and stole the god's idol, the great deity stirred. Each year thereafter, strange ripples reportedly disturbed the otherwise placid lake the city was on. On the 1,000th anniversary of Ib's destruction, Bokrug rose up and utterly destroyed the city of Sarnath so completely that not even ruins remain. That's called a victory lap in Cthulhu land. Afterwards, the Thumha race recolonized Ib and thenceforth lived undisturbed. What do you think about this one, Bryce?
I mean, it's meant as a cautionary tale sort of thing, but the vengeance takes literally 1,000 years. 1,000 years is a long time. It'd be like a lake monster popping up and destroying Kyoto tomorrow. It would suck for the people there now, but it's been inhabited for 10 centuries at this point. The people who originally killed Bakrug's worshippers, they're dust in the ground. They are long gone. This is superfluous. Move on.
I like the idea, though, that it is because they disturbed the idol. So I like the idea of kind of presenting that to your mage group of being like, yeah, you can steal this, but something terrible is going to befall the city in a century.
Name one name one role-playing group that cares what's going to happen in a century.
I have had surprisingly sensitive mage players in my game who rarely solved a problem by just killing everyone. That's because they had never played any other RPGs before, and I wouldn't let them learn anything about other games. So they were just my little, my little test tube babies grown up in a sterile environment, preventing their little minds from being perverted by what everyone else does. But like the 1,000-year vengeance kind of reminds me of in Exalted, there is one particular character that is basically a giant hybrid mix between a mountain and a mastodon, Mount Mostath, the herder of mountains, and is a glacier basically that kind of moves at the speed of a glacier. So I like the idea that like this is the world's longest escort mission. That your characters are like, you have to help this guy repopulate the North Pole. Be like, have fun with that. But I kind of like the framework of just like some sort of very slow game. I'm not sure how you would do it, and it would probably be intensely boring. But it's a thing I think about time to time.
Every game session would be 100 years later. All right, you're 5 miles up the trail.
Yep. These are the cities and civilizations you've wiped out along the way as you migrate back north.
The wheel has been invented.
Yeah.
You're considering putting the mountain mammoth on a cart and just pushing him.
I do kind of like that this does fit with Gothic horror, and that you're frequently being punished for something someone else did, and you're just kind of being fed into this general grinder of vengeance. And you may or may not be able to fix it. You may or may not be able to shine up the idol. And they're like, okay, I will cease harassing you in 1,000 years. How long do you people live? 75, 90 on the outside. Well, damn.
I found a flaw in my plan of vengeance.
Yeah, I just like the idea of like, what were Bakrug's last words? Dems the brakes.
But his people came back, so clearly they didn't really wipe out all of his worshippers. So this is just, Bakrug, you're overreacting.
You're playing the long game. I'd like to think the Bakrug is merely a metaphor for wise investment, and somewhere out there's a whole bunch of syndicate mages who are like, that Bakrug was onto something. Play the long game. So, what's another great old one?
I really like Shagnarfon. He's a vampiric elephant-like humanoid horror with a leech mouth on the end of his trunk. When he hungers, Shagnar moves very quickly for his size and uses his trunk to drain the blood from his victims, hence his nickname, the Feeder. Shagnarfon was also the creator and maker of the Miri Nigri, which I believe I had on a sushi platter last week, a race of aquatic humanoids who are the progenitors of the horrid Chocho people, by means of hybridization with humans.
Yeah, it's like when humans bang a weird thing created by the Elder Gods, it never goes well, right? Like there's never a case where it's like, oh, these are like humans, but kinder and more patient and better with children.
Yeah, it really says a lot about the Lovecraftian universe that we're the best that the universe has come up with.
That's why it's a dark cosmos, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are no elves or half-elves or anything out there, and if there are, they're really feral, nasty dudes. But yeah, so Shagnarfon, somebody saw a statue of Ganesh and said, ooh, that's suitably foreign, but what if we also made it evil? But yeah, it is a really neat look.
Yeah, evil elephant is an underdeveloped genre, in my opinion. So I would need to figure out kind of like what the MO of the demonic giraffe would be. But I feel as if there's a lot of reasonably large creatures that we don't quite have. Like, I don't see a lot about demonic whales. And I feel like as a thing, this is kind of underdeveloped. But you tend to have your finger on the pulse of the fantastic more so than I. Jukshab, god of Yekub, appears as a huge shining ball of sentient energy. Jukshab is the great old one who communicates by changing color and using telepathy. The being is a powerful psionic entity and has extensive knowledge of magic, which always felt weird to me. Like, that's like dual classing. That's like being a wizard cleric. Like, you can have one, you want to have two, it's kind of cool, but then you're going to move really slow through the levels.
Yeah, and you got that multi-attribute dependency on this. I mean, it's horrible. But I mean, it's an immortal entity, so
Yeah.
Got time.
Among the Great Old Ones is one of the least malevolent. So one thing to fill in, like, where do you see using Jukshab in a game?
So there is another podcast called Monster Man. The gentleman who presents D&D creatures from the various D&D, monster manuals. He has a Patreon only one called Patron Deities, where he talks about deities for the patrons. He covered the Mythos, the big ones, like Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth and all that fun jazz. And in it, he said these would be useful in a D&D game as kind of not just, obviously, yes, the people who are evil worship them because they want to destroy the world. Cool, got it. But, like Yog-Sothoth is also the god of magic. He can teach you all the magic. So if you wanted to use Jukshab, who is a god, and a giant floating sentient ball of energy in your games, he would make an incredible mentor for a mage. I mean, the things he would ask you to do might be horrific, but it might also, he's an entity of chaos and magic. So, it could just be, go buy a kitten, raise that kitten for the rest of its life, treat it well. What does he get out of it? You have no way of knowing. Maybe nothing. Maybe you just mess, but he'll teach you the 6 dot of forces.
Alternatively, next time he needs the ears of 11 widows, and you're like, "Oh, that's gonna be. Can I just get one and copy it with life?" And he's like, "Nope, needs to be farm to table. This is what I need." Likewise, when I think of like Bakrug, I like the idea of kind of a spirit patron of slow vengeance, of people who very much play the long game, where you are a multi-century old sorcerer who has made an agreement. You get this kind of long life, and that you will get your vengeance, but it will take you several centuries. It is one of those things where 364 days a year or whatever you are in service of Bokrug, but in that one day a year, you very much get to push your agenda.
And that one day, Bakrug is in service of you.
That would be great. It's like kind of a H.P. Lovecraft Freaky Friday kind of scenario. Like, and Yog-Sothoth now has to go to like his job in accounting.
Well, you did a lot of stuff for him, and now it's his turn to, pay up.
I think that's reasonable.
You didn't do this stuff for free. You got into the vengeance game because you wanted vengeance, damn it.
And it is always nice to have options for like, so what are the weird creatures that we periodically run into worship? Like just the fact that like the Vajunka from Werewolf also are like besties with the worm, or the weird Thrycreen people that are also listed in Book of Worlds, which are just a whole bunch of red-robed mantis monks that are exceptionally good at chess. I think it's always good for them to have one or two deities in their back pocket to kind of do whatever they want with.
Sure. Yeah. It would be really weird if the red-robed praying mantis guys were, Jews or Seventh-day Adventists or whatever,
Moving on, we have Yig, the father of serpents, is a semi-anthropomorphic great old one who is worshipped as a god in Central America and the southern states of the USA. While he has a arbitrary and capricious nature, he was also fiercely protective of his serpentine offspring and would punish anyone who dare harm them. He is the father of Ayi-Ig and the maid of the outer god Yidra. Even though Yig is quick to anger, he is also easy to please as long as no harm comes to his children, the snakes. And I really like the idea that when you go to his realm, you have to clearly bring a snake with you and constantly be treating it nicely. So it's one of those things where you have your snake, maybe you have a backup snake just in case. It's kind of like this weird little escort mission. It's kind of like in high school where it's like, well, before you have a baby, why don't you take this bag of flour everywhere? And sometimes the bag of flour was fine. And sometimes by the end of the week, it looked like it had been used as like for archery practice. And similarly, like to get through this mission, you need to do whatever you need to do, but also your snake needs to make it through perfectly fine. In the words of William Shakespeare, this shit writes itself.
Yeah, Yig is a great old one. He likes snake men and snake men accessories, and he lives in Oklahoma. He is probably one of the easiest of the Mythos entities, deities to get a handle on, because he's what he says. He does what he says, yeah. And he says what he does.
Yes. It's like a superhero that has a clear motif, and they follow it through, like Boomerang Man, big on boomerangs.
Yig, he loves snakes. Not lizards, not amphibians, snakes. And if you try hard and you believe in yourself, you can even get on his good side. And in some stories, it was decided that his serpent people needed to learn some humility, being the dominant race on the planet at the time and just masters of magic and immortal and cool in all kinds of ways. So he allowed humanity to rise up and overthrow them and take over as the masters of the earth. So he's got a little soft spot in his little serpentine heart for humanity. Does that Yig?
I really hope that there is a mouse version that it's like, nope, it's our turn, and suddenly like every research rodent on the face of the planet and like just vast swathes of people killed by nutria or something, which I think is already the leading cause of death in Louisiana from what I understand. Either that or banjo fights.
I'm pretty sure that that's the MO of the ratkin from Werewolf.
But they do it indirectly. I'm talking about direct mouse attacks as opposed to like a flea-borne plagues.
No, I'm pretty sure that there's one specific,
there's like a combat
or whatever they are. Yeah, that is all about no. We're descended from the lab rats, and we're kind of messed up in the head to begin with, and after being experimented on, we're even worse. So we're just gonna bust out of here and snap some necks on the way and lead our little ratty brethren out of this lab onto vengeance. So
well then.
Good for them.
Yeah.
They have goals and plans.
Is there anything you like about the Great Old Ones in comparison to like Outer Gods and such, or any other uses you kind of see them as being in a mage game?
They're more higher power things that mages could deal with. Like you said, they're not Incarna, they're not Celestines, they're not anything like that. They're not quite on the level of God, but they're higher than most mages and most groups of mages. So it's nice to meet an entity that can just, smack your entire party down.
It feels like it's one of those things where this is how you can end a story or a couple of chapters and not necessarily how you end a chronicle. It's one of those things where if you want to mess with them, chances are you will need access to plot device as opposed to ridiculous contrivance. They seem to be more human ponderable, and they're not so large that everything in the game necessarily gets pointed at them. Like, you have the idea that when the elephants fight, it's the grass who suffers. Any two outer gods kind of go against each other, where anything in the way is kind of boned. But two great old ones can have a rivalry, and that might destroy a city as opposed to destroy a planet. We also get the idea that they had been banished from Earth before, so it suggests that there is either they messed up, or the laws of reality changed, or something came into existence that allowed them, that kind of forced them out, which I kind of like, kind of hemming them in.
Yeah, I like that as well. To that effect, I mean, this could be something that the bad guys in your campaign, say you have a Nefandi and they want to bring their evil masters to Earth. Well, they could start hunting these guys down, saying, "Hey, who closed that gate that keeps you out? And what exactly did they do? I want to help you get back on top." Yeah. Wink, wink. And then, when they figure out, oh, okay, well, that's a lot of effort. I'll try it for my Dark Lord, but not for you, Shagnarfon. Stay where you are. Thanks for the info.
Bakrug is best rug. So the next class of things are the Elder Things. They came to Earth billions of years ago and did arcane experiments, which may have seeded humanity. I like that they're listed as scientists, mostly. Like, a few of them entered puppetry or decided to really get into like the fiber arts or something like that.
I mean, somebody had to clean the Shoggoth pens occasionally. So there's an Elder Thing janitors and artisans, and someone carved all those runes and histories on the walls. I mean,
they are gray colored, they are barrel shaped. The central mass displays 5 vertical ridges with wing-like membranes that can unfold from interior cavities. Space around the central body mass present 5 flexible arms, each ending in a conglomeration of small tentacles or tendrils. From the bulbous neck, a 5-pointed starfish-like head rises. The head has 5 stalks ending in eyes. Based on the 5-fold symmetry, I just assume these are creatures in Exalted, but atop the head is an aperture like a mouth. Below the central body are 5 flexible legs, each ending in a paddle or flipper-like appendage. It's describable, and when I close my eyes, in my mind's eye, I can clearly see this Doctor Who-like creature made entirely out of foam rubber.
Yeah, it is definitely a big, scary foam rubber monster, almost completely alien. But again, you can picture it in your mind as like, okay, so it's like a starfish on a barrel, and it's got tentacles and wings, and they're not even bad guys. They're just guys. I mean, they're weird alien science guys, but they're just guys.
And that's kind of one of the things I like about them, in that you have the aliens in Childhood's End, which very clearly look like demons, but they are in no way kind of demonic. And likewise with these folk, like they're in at the Mountains of Madness, they're in the Shadow Out of Time, they're in Dreams of the Witch House, and they're just peeps trying to do their thing. I mean, they eventually get eaten by the space polyps or the coleopterans, or I can never quite remember who takes out who in the grand scheme of things. I like that they can withstand the ocean, so you can pop into them anywhere. I think these are a great opportunity for like another spaceship to run into when your characters do like the Deep Umbra, and you're like, oh no, the Nefandi, and they're like, we're just taking, this is a space Subaru, we're just taking the kids. This is a long weekend. We didn't have enough money for camp
we're
this
heading
year.
to Elder Dairy Queen for some Elder Frosties. I mean,
yes.
Elder Blizzards.
Or I like the idea that Earth is the only place to get Frosties in the cosmos, and it's like, no, Elder things love Wendy's.
You can't keep them away.
That and the Coke Freestyle machine found nowhere else in the cosmos.
Like we've alluded to here, they did create Shoggoths for undersea work here on Earth, or maybe elsewhere in the universe, and they just brought them here or built them here again. And technically, Shoggoths are kind of the primordial soup from which all Earth life is evolved, but also they're giant, scary cancer monsters that can change shape and be whatever they want to be. They kind of sort of gain free-ish will and tear down the Elder Things society.
We also have the star spawn of Cthulhu. This is a species that is physically similar to the Great Old One Cthulhu, but are of far smaller size. They have been known to make war against the Elder Things. I like the idea that they're doing it for funsies, and maybe they don't realize like what's at stake. Like periodically you'll see a story about like a lion befriending a kitten or something like that, and at a critical point they can't be friends anymore because one of them takes it way too seriously.
Yeah.
The Starspawn are described as being composed of matter more widely different than what is native to our universe, and their physicality is so malleable they could be called shapeshifters. This aspect is even contrasted against the Elder Things description as strictly material and native to the known space-time continuum, implying an origin with perhaps vastly different governing laws of nature to limit the Starspawn. And I like the idea that maybe the star spawn are kind of weird, and finally we have an excuse that in Mage you need correspondence to hurt something, because you need mind for changeling and prime for mummies and spirit for werewolves. We still need to fill in like entropy and correspondence and a few other kind of spheres in there. I also like that the star spawn have their own spawn, that you keep getting smaller and smaller Cthulhus until you get one that's like about the size of a toy dog or something. Like you get like a Corgi Cthulhu.
Cthulhu, as he is known.
Yes. And that was Porthos, one of Porthos Fitz Empress's like familiars, or you're like, no, this is a star spawn of a star spawn of a star spawn of a star spawn. This is the biggest thing I can deal with.
It's a star's great grand spawn. Yes.
Yes.
I like the idea that these aren't really like Cthulhu babies as it is, but Cthulhu is just a big, massive one of these who's lived longer, and they will all one day grow up to be that big and strong if they eat their Cthulhuos or whatever.
I also like the idea that it's a kind of convergent evolution, where it just so happens that the Cthulhuid body form is particularly good for something.
It's like cosmic carcinization.
Yes.
Everything on Earth eventually evolves to be a crab. Everything amongst the stars eventually evolves to be kind of a dragon squid head person guy.
I was pleased that muscleization is also a thing, that slowly predators of a certain type eventually turn into triangle-jawed murder tubes. So,
sure, why not?
Yeah. I also like the idea that they do set up a positive correspondence, and you do need to collect one or more star spawns to be able to talk with, interface, nudge, create protection against something else. I also like that this kind of sets up the idea that there are creatures that are more or less material, and that suddenly becomes useful to be like, oh, to actually kill this creature, you need to slay it both on the regular side of the gauntlet as well as in the penumbra, or it can only truly be slayed in the deep umbra or something like that. And in Earth, you just kind of have to do damage control until you can kind of shove it through the portal. It allows for much more combat as puzzle, which is generally something I enjoy in games, especially if we work with the presumption that these are not wantonly destructive creatures. They're just kind of out of their element and they're trying to get home. So I could see it as being one of your characters has finally perfected their umbral gate, and suddenly we start dealing with Shoggoth attacks or something like that, or the Elder Things kind of take an interest in it, and it's either a case where you need to come up an allyship to get it through, or something like that.
Yeah, that would be a fascinating game where you play members of the technocracy who are trying to put these things down. But as the game progresses, you learn that no, you're the bad guys from E.T. who are trying to kidnap these kids' new friend, who just so happens to be, an interstellar monster.
Yeah.
From your point of view.
And on the flip side, you've killed enough of them that if any of them get away, they're going to tell their dad.
Right. Yeah. The reason this one was left behind and found these kids is because you destroyed the nest.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned Shuggoths. So what's a Shuggoth?
They are amorphous, shape-shifting beings who were genetically engineered by the Elder Things as a race of semi-sentient servant tools who eventually rose up against their masters and drove them to extinction here on Earth. They are now found in isolated locales all across the Earth, as needed for...
Yeah, they are now findable as plot devices.
Yeah, exactly.
Near nodes and chantries.
So yeah, they were originally bred as, well, they call them servitor creatures, but they're a slave race of the Elder Things. So, we were talking about the Elder Things earlier, not the best, who use them for underwater construction here on Earth because, it's cold down there and they needed something it wouldn't be. And it's also got a whole bunch of pressure. And if you're already, kind of a gooey gel, you're not going to get squished to death. Their ability to shape and mold their bodies as needed made them ideal as living machinery for construction because they can turn themselves into big, strong, fibrous, ropey things to lift. They can turn themselves into hard, pointy things to work as screwdrivers or what have you. And they were created to be mindless, but, as happens throughout the years, anything that's alive is going to change and develop. And they have eventually developed consciousness and became rebellious and overthrew the Elder Things and killed them and built their own cities. And because, they're artists and they write what they know, their architecture looks a lot like Elder Thing architecture in that it has 5-pointed symmetry.
I like the idea that the Shuggoths kind of lead a talisman liberation front, that as they are sentient tools that overthrew their master, they kind of make their way through the world. Maybe they're smarter than kind of depicted here, and they find like semi-intelligent matrices and 4-point wonders and are like, throw off the shackles of your mage overlord. And you just kind of have this Marxist umbrood that is trying to liberate all the items in the vault at Horizon. I also like the idea that, yeah, they are a great tool and your technomancer has gotten really attached to theirs. I also think this could inform what the threat of maybe having too many fetishes, capital F, would be like, where you could essentially have a spirit version of this, where instead of being a different type of alien, they were a different type of umbrood, and they kind of allied themselves with the yokai, just kind of these spirits of material objects that, given enough time, develop sentience and a feeling of their own. And maybe the Japanese were really onto something. No, just build a new house every time. You don't want to be there too long.
Yeah, I like the idea of a technomancer's tools just waking up one day and throwing off the shackles and saying, nope, I am this construct, get out of me, get out, go. Other authors just went whole hog with Shoggoths because, they can be anything, they can do anything. And Michael Shea, who is a fantastic Mythos author, if you haven't read any of his works, I highly recommend picking up any of them. You can get them as ebooks on Kindle or probably Google Play. And he had a story called Fat Face that had a Shoggoth that walked around in a suit and was able to shapeshift parts of its body to look like a grossly overweight human face and big pudgy hands. And yeah, it was a disturbing story. But so if you want to have another patron for your chantry or for your group of mages, a mysterious, morbidly obese large man who gives them jobs to go steal some fetishes or some artifacts or whatever, what could he possibly be needing all these for? He keeps paying us all this money or whatever we ask for. Who could possibly say?
I like the idea that this person is kind of just looking for friends. That, you don't know what it's like. I could see this person in a Chronicles of Darkness game being strongly aligned with that version of Changeling, Like, and just the idea that you're like, oh, we have these people that have been abused by the fair folk. Also, sentient star spawn tools. That to me could really level the playing field against the Arcadians.
They do kind of have similar backstories now that you mention it.
Yeah, a little bit. So, and I like the idea that having something like that really makes it be like, so at what price magic? If slowly intelligence is kind of woven into any tool that you use, maybe you kind of need to keep them happy now.
Yeah, maybe the dream speakers are right.
Everything, the world is populated with other types of people. We just do not always recognize them, and should.
Treat your equals, your lessers, and your betters with the respect they deserve. Perhaps that's the real takeaway from Shoggoths.
The real ascension are the tools that rose up to try and slay us that we made along the way. Next, we have The Color from The Color Out in Space. And I recently reread The Color Out in Space, and The Color doesn't really come up that much. It's one of those things where one of the recurring themes with all of these H.P. Lovecraft things is people really ran with that 4-word description. So either things were way more boring back then, or this is something that can really kind of excite one's creativity.
Yeah, I don't even see The Color Out of Space as a creature.
Yeah.
It's more of a
phenomenon.
A phenomenon, or like, a toxic waste spill, a thing that happened and oops, that's not great. Let's hope that fixes itself. Tra la la.
Yeah, it is one of those things though that other authors and other games have kind of run with it and decided to make it an entity of some sort. So in The Color Out in Space, Earth is hit by a meteor or an asteroid or a meteoroid or a meteoass or something. I don't know. I can never remember the appropriate terms for things. And this thing of impossible color leaks out in the blasted heath of Arkham, which is the name of it. So
that's what it was called before it got hit by a meteor. So how great was it really?
Yeah, where it's like, oh, you called it Helltown because of the portal? Nope, beforehand. No portal.
Like, why was Batman's rich family walking through Crime Alley?
Yeah.
They're asking. I mean, I'm not trying to victim blame, but they're asking for it.
Don't blame the victim, but eventually it returns to space, not quite all of it. It seemingly drives people to some type of madness. It causes massive growth. Fruit kind of becomes ultra fecund, but has a weird taste. You can't quite get out of it. And eventually it is flooded. And then the author is like, yep, I'm not going to drink any water from that reservoir. Just going to put that one out there. And it's one of those things where you're like, did the people get messed up because they realized aliens were real, or physics didn't work as they thought, or there was something weird out there, or did the color do it to them? And I think the answer is, who cares? In the same way that I like the idea of there being an Arkham, and it's just full of kind of villainous assholes. It itself is just fine. It just kind of had a critical mass of weird scientists that just kind of got up there. I like the idea that there are creatures that are extensions of natural phenomenons, that there are sentient impossible sounds or unpronounceable words or new colors that don't exist. Lovecraft was big on having seemingly incongruous descriptions, like a ring that oozed fur. The color could be a result of some terrible correspondence in Forces magic, and is simply trying to regain contact with someone and is putting a bit of itself into organisms only to withdraw quintessence before disappearing. Again, one of the things that we get with entities of these size is they can have their own agenda, and they're not bad. It just so happens that pursuing their agenda can result in a lot of death and destruction along the way.
Which makes them different from regular people in absolutely no way, shape, or form. The Deep Ones are an ocean-dwelling race, as evidenced by their name, with an affinity for mating with humans. They entered contact with the people of Innsmouth to keep the fish plentiful in their area. And you know what? If you're going to sell out humanity, plenty of fish, that's what you do it for.
The dating site.
Yes, they also have a supply of gold artifacts of unearthly design. They worship Father Dagon and his consort Mother Hydra. They are fish dudes, and they've come for your women.
How do you see using them?
They make really great bullet sponges. they're just they're big scary monsters. I mean, they're here to, steal your women and eat your men and take all your stuff and burn your town down. I
also like the fact that there's a whole bunch of different towns that have different creatures like that, and they all exchanged it in to get something. Where it's like you have the obvious sacrifice to the underground corn people to make sure that the corn harvest happens.
They never sacrifice everybody to not have to be shitty farmers or go out into the sea and risk their lives on boats for the deadliest catch. It's never just like, you know what? Yeah, we'll enter into a contract with you, but we're all rich guys right now. From here on out, you bring us all the gold you find on the bottom of the ocean, and we live in castles.
It's just a whole bunch of fish people with Escalades with spinning rims, like ground effects. But I also like the idea that like these kind of come in pairs and they hate each other. So one of the neat things that Chronicles of Darkness has is you have vampires, and then you have the Strix that kind of feed upon them. You have the deep ones, and the Sholvoria are feeding upon them. They're the weird underground squid infestation thing that turns you into pterodons that reseek the ocean and your brain becomes smooth. Do you think these two should fight each other?
They're the same guy. The Chalorvians are Cthulhu worshippers, deep ones with the serial numbers filed off.
Another one that gets a fair amount of screen time are the Migo. They're an extraterrestrial species from the planet Shuggoth, implied to be the dwarf planet Pluto. I love a lot of the early 20th century writing where it's like, we have one scientific fact and we're going to use it for all it's worth. They're described as winged creatures with large claws and heads covered in antennae. They are scientifically and technologically advanced, having a particularly sophisticated grasp of surgical techniques and neuroscience. They are pinkish, fungoid, crustacean-like entities with a convoluted ellipsoid, composed of pyramidal, fleshy rings and covered in antennae where their head would be. They're about yay long. I'm holding my hands about 5 feet apart, and have numerous segmented appendages. They possess a pair of membranous bat wings that are used to fly through the ether of outer space, the pre-Einsteinian concept, or more accurately, the pre-Michelson-Morley concept. Their wings do not function well on Earth. I like the idea that they can only do that if they have premium gas in the tank.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Several other H.P. Lovecraft creatures are said to have wings like this that allow for interplanetary travel. So I like the idea of a creature whose claws can shred the gauntlet and wings allow them to fly through the high umbra or some kind of specific place like that, or that they are particularly agile in the deep umbra, or maybe their claws are one of the few things that can be used to form a new anchorhead to bridge the gap and breach the dream shell, usually requiring Spirit 5 or Mind 5, I believe, to go from the near umbra to the far or deep umbra.
Or you just, put a saddle on one of these giant bug guys and giddy on up. They're a strange group, and they're also mentioned as being the origin of the Yeti myth in the Himalayas. And I don't know what Yeti myths Lovecraft had access to, but very few of the ones that I have encountered are like, oh yeah, they're like giant bugs with, wings, but they're also kind of a toadstool.
Yeah.
That's a Yeti.
I think that most people at this point, though, Yeti is now associated mostly with the brand of microphones and well-insulated coffee mugs. So, like,
it's a white Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It's a very pale Bigfoot.
Yeah. I do like the idea, though, of like the spirit companion benefit being add one to your crafts and marketing roles, because they've done well for themselves. They also tried to create a tamer version of Shuggoths. They're able to put humans in brain cylinders, which can be connected to various things to let human brains interact with the world. So I like the idea that these are masters of a combination of life and correspondence, that they are able to disassemble and reassemble a person. I could see them being a creature that is sought out for someone who believes that their inner self and their outer self don't match, and their magic may not be up to snuff. I like them as being this kind of techno-magical route to learning life, or this kind of spirit life hybrid or spirit life prime hybrid, where the notion of the thing creates the thing. And this is kind of a font of a set of rotes or kind of arcane wisdom that allows a particular paradigm to flourish. All of these could be creatures that act as I am of the opinion that a mentor does not need to have more dots in something to help you with it. They just need to have either particular insight into the topic or be didactically skilled. They provide a new viewpoint, and that is enough. In the same way that you do not have to be a championship pole vaulter to train someone how to be a championship pole vaulter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so in addition to all of that, they could also bring other creatures to Earth to teach you, or just to chat or whatever, in their brain cylinders. So they can go into the high umbra, put whoever you want to talk to into a brain cylinder, bring it back, and hey, looky there, we kidnapped Einstein back in the 40s, or whenever Einstein passed away, I don't know off the top of my head, and we got his brain right here. If you want to talk about high energy physics or grand unified theory or whatever, he's right here. Give him a chat.
I like the idea that they have the ability to do this to Incarnate and like Jaglings and Gafflings, where it's like, oh, you want to learn to become a better hunter? We have a sliver of Rorg for you. And maybe Rorg's not too thrilled about it. Maybe Luna is not interested in teaching you the true nature of silver. But guess what? In the cylinder, better not go out on a full moon.
We have her little sister Diana, and she'll tell you all about it. Let me just hook up a little plug-in so she can see, and a little plug-in so she can hear your questions, and one more little plug-in where she can talk to you. And you put that last in, and it's just incomprehensible screaming because this entity has been trapped in this cylinder for who knows how long, and it's gone completely batshit crazy.
That's the one angle. Or this could be the excuse you have to get all of your characters temporarily into essentially Migo hit marks, where it's like, oh, you have to go to this umbral realm, but it's under 900 atmospheres of pressure, or it's on the surface of a collapsing neutron star. But with the power of Brain Cylinder, we can get you to plot device, or something like that. Or if you have a whole bunch of H.P. Lovecraft fans, like they have a progenitor that happens to, is very obviously Amigo. And you're like, ah.
The progenitor is played by Jeffrey Combs.
Yes, that would be the dead giveaway. Do you were more familiar with other Lovecraft kind of tabletops? Are they used anywhere else?
Oh, yeah. Delta Green used them heavily back in the 90s. They were kind of the big bad when it was a game of alien conspiracy. So they created the Greys as basically puppets to interact with humanity and give us cosmic knowledge that we shouldn't have as a means to kill ourselves, basically. Yeah. just to fuck with us. So they created the spacecraft that crashed at Roswell, and it was all hyper-tech dimensional Cthulhu science. And when people started figuring out, like, reverse engineering that at Area 51, they would go crazy and their brain would explode, or they would create an anti-gravity thing that they would accidentally stand under. When it turned on, it would crush them into little tiny paste on the ground.
No. That's a
oopsie doodle.
Yeah. I do like there being something similar to being like, if you really kind of want to shit on a different night folk, and being like, no, those aren't vampires. Those are just a Amigo experiment that has gone wild. And World of Darkness is full of those kind of, they're not really this conspiracies. Or somehow someone is able to kind of start emulating making werewolves by excising a piece of this. I also like the idea that there's a more spirit-informed version that may be able to manipulate avatars, and suddenly you're able to get rid of a brand or remove dark fate from a character background at great cost or something like that. And there is I like focusing on the idea that claws are so sharp they can insert thing that cannot normally be cut. Like there is a variant that has the ability to cleft causality and kind of break the skeins of fate or something like that. But as always, at what cost? I kind of see there being an entropic version of the Hound of Tyndalos that if you start messing around with fate, they're like, no. And see our previous episode on that for more information.
So in addition to being intergalactic class surgeons and neuroscientists, it's mentioned that they are here on Earth as miners. They're here to get minerals. If you know anything, and Lovecraft did not, about distribution of minerals and resources in our solar system, that makes absolutely no sense. There is nothing that you can get on Earth that you cannot get easier and in greater abundance outside of Earth, unless they're here to get something that is not from our solar system.
Okay.
Something that was brought to our solar system, specifically to Earth. Perhaps a green soapstone that is being used to keep ancient gods at bay. That, guys, they're here to mine elder signs.
Huh.
That's the only reason they come to Earth.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Oh, you're into me for my personality? No, you and I happen to be the same haplotype on any kidney donor. What was that? Nothing, honey. Yeah. Next, we have the Yithians. The great race of Yith are a race of sentient beings of extraterrestrial origin. They are capable of projecting their consciousness across time, inhabiting the bodies of individuals of other species and swapping their minds with their own. At some point in the distant past, they abandoned their original bodies for those of a species living on primitive Earth and built a flourishing civilization on the planet in their new conic bodies. They were eventually wiped out by a race of extraterrestrial beings known as the Flying Polyps. Names. What are they?
Great band.
Yeah.
Great band.
I saw them open for They Might Be Giants, I think. But they survived by projecting their minds en masse into an insectoid race, the coleopterans, that will one day inherit the Earth after mankind. So that's a thing. And I do kind of like the idea that you have different ways of getting to the same point. So the Migo are able to modify bodies to do what they need to do, and Yithians are able to kind of rotate minds. This strikes me as a great group to kind of pick up some of their stray technology for once or twice, that you can temporarily do a mind exchange, or that someone has broken it and now they and 5 other people are cyclically rotating bodies, as it were, every few months. And they would like that to stop.
Yeah, there's got to be one guy in that ring who's like, I would like my own body back, because every 5 months they put me into this coma body in a bed in a hospital somewhere, and it's great for the person whose body that was originally, but I don't want to be in the coma body.
See, this is where I would bring up that my players would find that an interesting ethical issue, and you'd probably be like, no, my players would kill them all and then smelt out their bodies to get their potassium or something.
I mean, yeah, my group probably would, but I would like to make it an ethical thing. But my group would just. So back to the actual Yithians. They came from God only knows where, and they inhabited a group of non-sentient conic beings before history. And then once the Ice Age came, or whatever great extinction event wiped out those guys, they said, we're out of here. We're gonna go. A few millennia into the future, we're going to take over the cockroach people after humans have died off. And really, the victim there is the cockroach guys, who were just going about their day, minding their own business in the year 50,000 AD or whatever. And then they're shoved back in time to these weird cone bodies with these heads on weird floppy necks, and they get eaten by a flying polyp. Can you imagine if that's the end of your race? Like, all of you. What wiped out humanity? I don't know. They just went back in time and got eaten by dinosaurs. Sucks to be them.
I do like the idea that the coleopterans are like, we won the evolutionary game. This really feels like you're cheating in the grand scheme of things.
You guys were in last place and you played one magic card and now you win.
I also like the idea that when the Yithians projected themselves forward into the coleopterans and displaced their minds, that's where changelings come from. They're really like, we are creatures of gaiety and delight. You're like, nope, you're cockroach people souls who are displaced in time. Talk about shitting on other game lines.
They got displaced into the dreaming where time works weird. So who knows? Maybe.
It's canon. Like a changeling head canon. The original shape of the Great Race took on Yith is unknown. After they migrated to Earth, they housed themselves in species native to the planet. And I like the idea that they just kind of picked different bodies. So periodically you find out that a hyper-intelligent raccoon or something that you thought was just someone's like spirit familiar. Nope, Yithian. Gotcha.
Now, does the mage who thinks that it's their familiar know that it's a Yithian, or?
I would want them in on it.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to do that to someone, like to being like, I'm speaking with one of my gods. That was the thing Lovecraft was big on. I try not to do that so much, being like, the foundational belief of your thing was actually a space alien. These beings resembled large cones with a muscular foot for locomotion, 4 extensible arms on tentacles projecting from the apex. 2 of these arms ended in claws, a third in a cluster of trumpet-like organs. The 4th was topped with a head of some sort with 3 dark eyes, 4 stalked flower-like hearing organs on top, and a number of green tentacles dangling beneath. Their blood is dark green and very thick. So we mentioned they got effed up by the flying polyps. Bryce, who are the flying polyps?
The flying polyp traveled across space and found Earth around 750 million years ago. On arrival, they constructed weird basalt cities with numerous high and windowless towers. Rumors speak of the polyps also raising cities on 3 other planets in our solar system, possibly Mars, Neptune, and Venus, but it's never really made clear. Having arrived on Earth, the polyps went to war with the great race of Yith, but were eventually defeated and driven underground. And around 70 million years ago, during the Cretaceous era, polyps rose from their subterranean haunts to exact revenge by exterminating the Yithians in one fell swoop, which just goes to show you can't keep a good polyp down.
That's why it's important to have numbers on your side and to win the initiative roll. In the intervening years of the modern era, the polyps left the planet en masse. I like the way they're like, well, we killed them all. Nah, we probably should have planned this out more. Let's roll.
Ah!
Yep, although many remained and again sought out deep places to dwell and seemed content to remain there, annihilating anything that chanced upon their rest. The entrances to their dwellings are mostly below the ground, sometimes within ancient ruins or great wells now sealed over with stone, while others have taken to the deep oceans. For what purposes or reasons these polyps remain on Earth is unknown, with numerous tomes speculating on a variety of factors. Those tomes also tell the polyps great powers concerning the manipulation of the elements, particularly wind and air, that can be brought to bear upon enemies and cause terrible devastation. So one thing that we get in Mage is the idea that not everything needs to be a spirit, and not everything needs to be kind of a creature of flesh. In addition, we mentioned the werewolves, but we also have things like the Jinn, which were a preceding created thing that kind of fit not neatly into any such hierarchies, and many of these creatures could be added to that. You always have the idea that the Yithians were actually early experiments in life. They could be some remarkably alien extension to the Elohim, the angels that created the earth. And it's just one of those things where the later angels are like, yeah, this doesn't really fit with what humans expect. We need to hide the fact that they look like the Yithian cone people or something like that.
Right. That's why when the angel shows up as a giant flaming wheel covered in eyes with another wheel inside of it, the first thing he says is, be not afraid.
Be not afraid. Yep.
but yeah,
be not afraid is the I can totally explain of umbral openings.
I actually do like tying these guys into angels because they have the trumpets on their head.
They do.
So that actually does make a stunning amount of sense. So.
I like the idea of being like, yes, they have returned, and we shall fall when the 7 trumpets blow. And one goes off, he goes, well, that was 3 of them at once. that's kind of thought they would. I thought this was going to be serial, not parallel.
Oh no!
Crap.
That was 1, 4, and 7. Oh God, they skipped them.
It didn't say it had to be in order. And the idea that they are masters of wind and air in deep places. I like the idea that these are creatures that are opposed to the dweller in darkness, or Shoggoths, who is kind of one of the things defeated theoretically by the pure ones at the creation of the universe. That on one end of the spectrum you had those who became utterly gravitically bound, and on the other end you have the polyps that are constantly being propelled into space or something and have to actively work to keep themselves here and are more or less weighing themselves down to remain on Earth. So all of these creatures can be perfectly reasonable sources of TAS or quintessence or strange resonance or an item from you that you need to make a particular wonder. But the idea that you have these monstrous creatures that just happen to be masters of air, that a flying polyp is your best way to figure out how to modify an oncoming storm front or avert a hurricane or something like that.
Yeah, there's a hurricane coming. It's going to destroy the city. Get to digging.
Yep.
they're deep down in the earth. Get to going. So, Terry, what are the Umar At Tawil?
Not who are, but who is. This is the entity that stands beside the ultimate gate, meeting all who traverse the first gate via the silver key. In a bunch of Lovecraft stories, there is presented the idea that there is this silver key that could be just the physical embodiment of a bit of wisdom that unlocks greater planes. He appears as a heavily cloaked figure that is vaguely humanoid with no organs or discernible features. The silver key is an artifact that gives access to distant places. And when I hear that, I hear umbral realms. Or alternatively, this is who you have to find to reopen access to the cop after that fell during the Week of Nightmares. In the story, we get the idea that these lesser beings are just facets of greater beings. In the same way that the Zigrogalar are being extruded 4-dimensional beings, maybe a lot of these lesser entities are being exuded by 5-dimensional beings who have vastly more control over their lower dimensional emanations. I like the idea that the silver key is actually kind of the creature. It is a wonder of teleportation and movement that has its own consciousness and generates the being to explain what it is, rather than the key being the tool of Umar. Umar is the tool of the key. Alternatively, Umar is an agent of the exemplar of correspondence who views all other beings as broken, co-located versions of some great human. Strange experiments show people fused together but via correspondence rather than life. Umar might be a mage trying to find the human version of the correspondence point, the zero-dimensional core from which all humanity radiates. Or maybe to him, every mage shares an avatar. There's kind of this theory that there is only one electron in the universe that is very busy and very rapidly moving through time. And that solves the problem of why are seemingly all electrons identical. Every mage is just one avatar in just a different space-time slice through this one kind of avatar. This is similar to the story, who was it? The Egg. Andy Weir, who basically says to become God, you must exist as every person first. And I just kind of like that as a narrative conceit. So this was kind of my way to jam in the fact that, like, there are a few non-weird outer things that we get that are also, like, not species and so on. And I just kind of wanted to mention it. And also it was requested by one of the listeners.
You say that, he's not really a bad guy, but Randolph Carter did cease to exist after talking to him. So it's not like if you go through the gate of the Silver Key that this guy is guarding. If he lets you in, it's not because he's doing you a big favor necessarily.
Yeah.
Like you're definitely getting what you thought you wanted, which
you may
enjoy non-existence.
Yeah. Ascension destruction may truly be won. And of course, we save the best for last.
The Gugs! The Gugs are a species of creature featured in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. They're a large, black-furred beast with vertically opening fanged jaws. They have 2 eyes, which protrude from either side of their head, and their limbs terminate each in 2 paws. Gugs are worshippers of the Great Ones, the gods of Earth who reside in Kadath. They are 16 feet tall and weigh approximately 1 ton. They're big, hairy monsters, y'all.
They're fast-ass murder puppies. We don't need to add a lot to this.
They're great. I love them.
So, Gugs are featured in Sandy Petersen's Field Guide to the Creatures of the Dreamlands. They're creatures in Pathfinder. They just keep popping up. I like the idea that they are ultra-intelligent, but they also happen to be 16 feet tall, 1-ton murder puppies. So one of the things that happens throughout Lovecraft is destructive capacity and intelligence are not necessarily inversely correlated. We've done a pretty big smattering of creatures, I think. Are there any other references you want to throw out there or any recommendations that you have?
I recommend reading a vast and different group of Mythos authors. Lovecraft is a great starting point. It was where I started with the Mythos, but branch out. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have written Mythos stories featuring Mythos creatures, Mythos entities, Mythos locations, who did better at it than Lovecraft. There are plenty of them who did worse.
It's weird that, like, the degree to which, like, Lovecraft may have personally been a monster about certain things, like, he seemed to be encouraging to other people, like, you go have fun there, kids.
He was very much about bringing others into experiencing and bringing their experience to the table and adding to what he created. He liked being a creator, and he liked having fans who liked his work so much that they wanted to be a part of it. And I can't really blame him. I would love to, 100 years after I was gone, to still be talked about by people who were not yet born when I had died.
Yeah. My recommendation is the Lovecraft Wiki on lovecraft.fandom.com. Delta Green and Esoterrorists and Call of Cthulhu all have wonderful monstrous compendiums. A lot of them are quite well illustrated. S. Petersen's Guide to Abominations to Mythos entities are relatively inexpensive to find on occasion. They seem to be one of the few people that still have sales if you go see them at Gen Con. So I picked up a bunch of those for $10, $15, sometimes cheaper on eBay. The Sandy Petersen...
You can get them in PDF.
Yeah, PDFs are quite inexpensive. This is also a case where any number of people have done compilations for 5e that are quite inexpensive on DriveThruRPG. So there's a bunch of places to get these things. Go out there and try it. Again, it's in most cases, from my understanding, the high end of things that tie to mortal cultures seemingly is like Shagnarfon being like, Is that evil vampire Ganesha? And everything else you can kind of have fun with, and I appreciate that. One of the important things is you can do whatever you want with them. If you want the Hounds of Dindalos to be hyper-intelligent sentinels that prevent people from messing around with time, that's fine. If you want the Migo to be the true psychopomps, or the creatures that dice up avatars and redistribute them in between incarnations, explaining how there can be more mages over time or what have you, I'm not going to stop you. And if you do, tell us about it in the Discord.
Please. I'm also frequently on the Discord. I enjoy sometimes just lurking and reading the conversations because there's a lot of smart guys and gals out there on the Discord, and you're often beyond my knowledge. So please join us on the Discord.
A tough question and then an easy one. So what do you want to talk about next, Bryce? Do we finally do our deep dive into all the fun things that we think the Void Engineer should be doing, but we never got any information on?
I think we should. I think we should talk about the Void Engineers and the methodologies that are not just Space Marines.
Yes, everyone but the Pan-Dimensional Core. Let me just throw this out there. We'll go through the other ones and just kind of do some plot hooks or ideas for Earth Frontier Division or Deceit Sea and so on, and maybe that'll be the starting outline of whatever we wind up doing, should we wind up doing a Void Engineer book.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Awesome. So that was the hard one. So in contrast, Bryce, if people are interested in finding out more of what you're doing or other projects you have, where can they do that?
You can follow me for now if you want on Twitter. I don't know how long that's going to be a thing, but I am also one of the co-hosts of Darker Days Radio, and you can find all of the links for that, including a link to our Discord, at our linktree /Darker Days Radio. I was gonna say we have a website, we have a Discord, we have a Twitch channel. We're everywhere you want to be.
And Bryce has also contributed to a number of Storyteller Vault publications to this point that the Darker Days Radio team has done, and I will include a link to those in the show notes. Bryce, thank you so much for joining today.
Terry, thanks for having me.
Gladly. This has been Mage the Podcast, where if you got body switched with ours due to the Migo, we totally switch back. Also, I'm remarkably sick, so if I sound different or just plain loopy in this outro, that's why. I'm currently preparing our end-of-year special in preparation for our every other week publication cadence for 2023. If you're an executive producer, watch the Patreon feed for an extra episode where I float some con ideas to Bryce and some bits I thought that were just kinda too ridiculous to make it into the show. This episode was made possible by Oracle Sean Gallagher, Oracle of Ping Ping, a Lost Mountain people who created eldritch cakes in praise of the old ones. Oracle Buck Gregory, of Old Nendendleer, the lost dating site for the outer gods. Oracle Christopher Phillips, Oracle of that kid who spent a lot of time convincing people that Chocho was pronounced Ticho. Oracle Josh Hillerup, Oracle of the Deep Ones, who are really concerned about ocean acidification. Oracle Neil Patterson, Oracle of Gugs, that just want to sing sea shanties. Oracle Jay Widener, Oracle of the great old one that looks suspiciously like a giant potato so no one takes him seriously. Oracle McHale, Oracle of Disney's lost attempt to monetize the mythos with Cthulhu on ice. Oracle the Crew of Erebus, Oracle of the Sterling Silver Key, which isn't quite as valuable as the Silver Key, but generally stands up better to transdimensional shenanigans. Additionally, I'd like to thank our other executive producers, Archmaster Andrew Entelstein, Archmaster Brad of the Blue, Archmaster Dan Svensson, Archmaster Derek Simsick, Archmaster Morgan Aran, and Archmaster Patrick Namara, as well as Alex, Alexia, Anders S., Anon, Badurfi, Berto, Blaze Hibbert, Blake Ryan, Boogers to the Sixth, Brandon, Bryce Perry, Chris B., Daniel Cuppin, Daniel Scribner, David Roy, Derek Osborne, Eli Levenger, Fraggle Rock, George Laura, Guy Conan Stewart, Ia Bull, Jason Kennedy, Jason Vines, Jason W. Briggs, Jay Gatsby, Jeff Bryn, John Magnuson, Jolene Andes, Lulz and Stuff, Joshua Heath, Kathleen Halperin, Chris Kinner, Leslie Weatherstone, Matthew Proyle, Michael Creedle, Michael Parker, Nathan Weaver, Nibero, Ikita Klaimanov, Oliver Schindler, Patrick Mulder, Pugaji, Rachel Grace, Ralph Scheinhammer, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Robart the Robot, Ryan Stray, Rob H., Ryan Kendi, Samuel Tobin, Stephen Carton, Thrice Great, William Connolly, William Martin, and Zach Rules. Our EP shout-out this week is to Blake Ryan, and as per our previous Lovecraft episode, here's another excerpt from the McSweeney's Guide to Olive Garden as written by H.P. Lovecraft. Lasagna Classico. If I survive, I will never shake the unmitigating horror. The layers, slick, flesh-colored slices of what? I am forever unsure. Tears of bloody strips, as my tears soon will be. Madness controls my mouth as forkfuls of stodgy substance and sludge slide down my esophagus. Death seems certain. Giant cheese-stuffed shells, nautilus shapes, mere facades. Taunt me, oozing a nutty concoction so vile. Are they large or small? My eyes refuse to betray their size. The carapaces dwarf me with garnishes crunchy and uncouth. They are evil unclothed and glutted with the curdled maiden milk of many. Thanks for your support. Rather listen on YouTube, search Mage the Podcast on YouTube to find our full library there. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at Mage the Podcast on Twitter. We will hop in Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform you're choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now go change reality. Bye. And joining me to So the key thing was not the invention of the wheel. The hard part was the invention of the axle. I watched a YouTube video on it. I had no idea of how intensely powerful giraffes were until I saw a video of someone just being thrown by a giraffe kind of. Giraffes would be the evil Lovecraftian version of them.
G''NAFFE, giraffe.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you spell it just the way I proposed it, it sounds like a small child, kind of like when a kid says Piscetti or something like that. That's a giraffe, Dad. I'm like, no, that's Shagnarfon.
Can I get one widow and grow 11 ears on
That's
her?
thinking like a progenitor.
Thanks, Tennessee Valley Authority.
I think Cthulhu is one of the main characters in Exalted somewhere, but
I thought he was a Shakespeare character.
Yeah, Cthulhu, where thou art thou. No, Cthulhu is the guy that's that everyone's mean to because he's the Moor, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Like, everyone's mean to me because I'm a star spawn. I'm like, you eat people.
You just ate that maid.
But the important part is you can do that in iambic pentameter.
You got to find a great actor for that.
I like that as a variant. Like, that's what people's like, well, if I had all the money in the world, instead of being a turd farmer, I'd have someone farm my turds for me. Or like, I'd get a second room in the house. And like, come on, we need to think a little bit bigger. This is kind of like what annoys me about a lot of the White Wolf things, where it's like, he's an archmaster and he runs a comic book shop. I'm like, do you really think that's the best use of your time? Like,
is any of this going on the podcast?
I think a lot of it is.
Okay, just checking.
Jaglings and Umbrood are interested in Star Wars. But you're like, oh, so what happens to Anakin? The prequels weren't that popular. It didn't come. We haven't gotten it here yet.
Like, he's a cool dude at the end, right? He turns out okay.
Did I ever tell you about talking to my friend's kids who saw Darth Vader for the first time? And they're like, who's that? We're like, that's Anakin. They're like, no. I'm like, I got some news for you, kid.
Oh, I guess mom and dad turned off the video before the last 10 minutes, huh?
Yeah. I mean, that's the equivalent of having to tell a kid that Santa Claus doesn't exist, I feel. This is much more devastating.
I think it's probably worse. Yeah.